BRICS is not simply a passing fad. It is actually one of the most significant developments of our times. In fact, I would say that we are actually witnessing an unexpected rise of a new global superpower. In this video, I shall break down the three broad reasons why I say this is happening. Very quietly, a revolution is underway. BRICS has emerged as a powerful challenge to the global political and economic order. By 2030, BRICS is expected to bypass the G7 countries. But how did all this happen? In order to understand this, we have to go back to the very beginning. In 2008, the world was in turmoil. The 2008 financial crisis was an epic financial and economic collapse. The world had not seen such a financial crisis since the Great Depression of the 1920s. It cost many ordinary people their jobs, their life savings, their homes, or all three. It began in the United States and soon spread to Europe and beyond, sending shockwaves through the global economy, shaking the foundations of trust in the Western financial systems. For emerging economies, it was a wake-up call. It was in this atmosphere that BRIC, Brazil, Russia, India, and China held their first summit in 2009 in Russia.
The first ever BRICS summit is getting underway in Russia. The U.S. dollar's status as a reserve currency is sure to be one hot item under debate, but stealing the headlines right now.
Though South Africa would join later, these four countries shared one common frustration. They were powerful economies, shackled by systems that they did not control. Brazil brought vast resources. Russia wielded energy power. India offered a massive consumer base and tech industry. China brought manufacturing and economic might. And soon, South Africa, representing the African continent, would add further geopolitical reach. For these nations, BRICS was more than a partnership. It was a way to push back. The heart of the idea was a powerful goal: to act as a counterweight to the Western-dominated financial system, reduce their dependency on the US dollar, and to create a multipolar world where emerging economies had a real voice. From the start, BRICS had its eyes on an ambitious goal: de-dollarization. For decades, the US dollar-denominated global trade created dependence that left BRICS nations vulnerable to US financial policies. They wanted a more stable, predictable, and more diversified international monetary system. Russia, in particular, warned that the US dollar had not performed well as the world's reserve currency. But moving away from the dollar wasn't just an idea. It became a shared mission. Yet, bringing together such diverse nations wasn't easy. There was the China-India border tensions, for example. Political systems were varied, from India's democracy to China's one-party system and others. Economies too ranged from resource-rich Russia to industrialized China, leading to contrasting economic priorities. These internal divides led many to conclude that BRICS was destined to fail, or at best, to remain as an informal group within international forums where they could merely exchange points of view. Nothing could have been further from the truth. Little did they know what was to come. Despite the challenges, BRICS managed some early victories. In 2009, the group agreed to cooperate on trade and economic issues, setting the tone for practical collaboration. And by 2010, they were demanding reforms at the IMF, a bold stance that signaled BRICS was serious about change. But these early moves were just the beginning. Behind closed doors, BRICS leaders were laying plans for something much bigger. Institutions that could one day rival the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund. Institutions that would lead to a BRICS Development Bank and Emergency Reserve Fund, aiming at giving the emerging economies a true alternative to the current global economic order. Would these ambitious plans succeed? Can BRICS stand united to take on the Western dominated economic and financial order? I shall see you in the next episode. After the quiet revolution that gave birth to BRICS, the group now faced its first major test: how to transform from an ambitious idea into a truly global force. In 2010, South Africa officially joined BRICS, transforming the bloc into a coalition that now spanned 4 continents. But this wasn't just about symbolism. It was a game-changing move. But why was South Africa's admission a game-changing move? Well, South Africa is Africa's second largest economy, with a GDP of 375 billion in 2010. Its infrastructure and financial systems made it the perfect gateway for BRICS to access Africa's untapped potential. As Jacob Zuma, then President of South Africa, declared, the country's membership gave BRICS a truly global character, connecting Africa's opportunities to the bloc's ambitions. Let us consider some of the facts. South Africa is a treasure trove of strategic minerals, supplying over 70% of the world's platinum and rhodium, metals indispensable to the electronics and green technologies. The country also controls vast reserves of manganese, used in battery technology, and chromium, critical for stainless steel. Its uranium reserves, extracted as a byproduct of gold mining, are essential for nuclear technology. In a world increasingly reliant on green energy and advanced technology, South Africa's resources position BRICS as a key player in shaping the supply chains of the future. With South Africa on board, it now held significant influence over the supply of critical metals essential for the industries of tomorrow. South Africa's admission was a strategic move that would define BRICS' hallmark approach to expansion. Every admission into BRICS was calculated to further solidify the bloc's geopolitical weight to ensure its position as a global force. And this strategy in action can be seen once again when we discuss Indonesia's admission as a member of BRICS later in this video. So stay on. While South Africa's inclusion expanded BRICS' economic footprint, the bloc also made its first bold challenge to the Western-dominated financial system. At the G20 summit in 2010, BRICS leaders demanded reforms to the IMF quota system. At the time, the United States controlled 17% of the IMF's voting power, enough to veto any major decisions, while Europe collectively held 30%. In stark contrast, BRICS countries, representing 25% of the global GDP, held just 11% of voting power. BRICS called for a fairer representation that reflected the economic realities of the 21st century. Western powers, particularly the United States and Europe, resisted, arguing that maintaining their control was necessary for global financial stability. While minor adjustments were made to increase quotas for emerging markets, BRICS found the pace of reform too slow. The frustration fueled their resolve to create alternatives to the IMF and World Bank. They began laying the groundwork for financial independence, starting with 2 bold initiatives. In 2012, BRICS leaders proposed the creation of the New Development Bank, a direct challenge to the World Bank. Its goal was to finance infrastructure projects in emerging economies without the conditions imposed by Western institutions. BRICS countries also signed agreements to trade in their local currencies, bypassing the US dollar. By 2013, these swaps accounted for over 150 billion in trade, marking the first concrete steps towards de-dollarization. With economic initiatives underway, BRICS began asserting itself politically. South Africa's membership gave the bloc a stronger voice on African issues, further diversifying its influence. BRICS took joint positions on global issues, opposing Western interventions in Syria and Libya. At the UN, the bloc's coordinated votes began to challenge the Western dominated narrative on climate change and trade policies as well. BRICS began carving its path as a force to be reckoned with, but the most transformative moves were still to come. In our next episode, we'll explore how BRICS fight for financial independence to the next level. The new development bank was a direct challenge to the West. With the World Bank and the IMF firmly in the grip of the Western societies, could the BRICS countries rewrite the rules of the global economic order, which has been in place for the last 7 decades or so? The New Development Bank, or NDB, was established in 2014 by the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, as an alternative to Western-led financial institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. For decades, these institutions had been criticized for their loan conditionalities, which often forced countries into austerity and economic dependency. BRICS nations envisaged the NDB as a fresh start, a bank designed to prioritize the development needs of the Global South without the strings attached. The initial capital, a staggering $50 billion, shared equally among its founding members. This equal shareholding was in fact a statement that no one country would dominate the institution, unlike the US-centric World Bank or the European-led IMF. What makes the NDB different from the other banks? There are at least 3 factors. Number 1, the NDB focuses on infrastructure and sustainable development and projects which are really required by the emerging economies. The NDB has funded projects in renewable energy, transportation, and urban development, all tailored to the priorities of emerging economies. Number 2, there are no political conditions. Unlike the Western financial institutions, the NDB does not impose any political reforms as a prerequisite for loans. This has made it especially attractive to countries which are wary of external interference. And number 3, local currency usage. A groundbreaking feature is its emphasis in lending in local currencies, which reduces borrower nations' dependency on the US dollar and shields them from currency volatility. The NDB's first projects included solar power plants in India, sustainable water projects in Brazil, and transportation initiatives in Russia. But it wasn't just about funding. It was about shifting the balance of power. But the road hasn't been smooth. First, unlike the World Bank, which boasts nearly 190 members, the NDB's membership is still small, although it is expanding to include countries like UAE, Egypt, and Bangladesh, and presumably the newer partner countries would also become members in this bank. However, the BRICS members have made it clear that this capital will be expanded. For expanding this war chest is vital for greater influence. Number 3, geopolitical pressure. The Russia-Ukraine conflict and the US-China tensions tested the unity of BRICS members, and this has somewhat complicated the NDB's mission. Despite these hurdles, the NDB represents an ambitious attempt to level the playing field. The establishment of the NDB sent shockwaves through the Western financial institutions. Realizing that the NDB could become an important player, the World Bank and the IMF began rethinking their strategies, now offering more flexible terms to retain their relevance. Number 2, with the NDB pushing for local currency loans, the Western powers have doubled down on the dollar's supremacy, fearing its erosion would undermine their global influence. Number 3, the West has also intensified its engagement with emerging economies, offering alternative funding mechanisms to counter BRICS' appeal. The NDB may not have dethroned the World Bank, but it is certainly reshaping the narrative about global finance and the global financial architecture. So clearly, the BRICS Bank has got the attention of the World Bank and the IMF. So, what's next for the BRICS Bank? First, it has to expand the membership by including more countries from the global south. Only then the NDB can grow its influence and resources. And number two, the NDB's focus on sustainable development could position itself as a leader in green financing. Number three, there is an urgent need to strengthen BRICS unity. In order to truly challenge Western dominance, the BRICS nations must overcome internal divisions and present a unified front. The new development bank is more than just a bank. It's a symbol of hope for a multipolar economic world. Whether it can fulfill that promise will depend on its ability to adapt and innovate in the face of Western resistance. The Western media has been quick to label BRICS as a bloc doomed to fail. This is also what was said of ASEAN when it was created in 1967, a group so diverse that it was simply not possible to remain united. But ASEAN has survived. In fact, it has thrived. For the last almost 6 decades now, it is one of the longest surviving regional organizations. Politically, BRICS faces significant hurdles in maintaining unity. One of the most glaring examples is the long-standing rivalry between India and China. Their border disputes, such as the Doklam standoff and the 2020 clashes in the Galwan Valley, have sparked tensions not only between the two nations, but also within BRICS. These issues often spill over into discussions on regional security and cooperation within the bloc. Similarly, Russia's war in Ukraine has deepened divisions. While Russia insists on a strong stance against Western influence, many BRICS members, like India and Brazil, have been more cautious, calling for diplomacy and peace. This differing approach to the Ukraine crisis highlights the political rifts within BRICS, as each member navigates its own national interests and alliances. Another challenge lies in balancing smaller economies like South Africa within the group. Its economic power is significantly lower than that of other members. This disparity creates difficulty in shaping policies that benefit all members equally. The presence of stark economic inequalities within the bloc adds to the complexity of its decision-making processes. BRICS also grapples with competing visions of leadership. China has consistently pushed for greater influence, especially through its initiatives like the Belt and Road Initiative, which it hopes will reshape global infrastructure and trade. However, some BRICS members, particularly India, have resisted China's dominance, fearing that China's economic expansion could overshadow their own interests. India, for example, has sought to strengthen its own leadership position in the global south by pushing initiatives like the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor. In addition, Brazil's leadership has centered around environmental issues, championing sustainable development, while Russia's approach is often framed in terms of geopolitical maneuvering and challenging Western dominance. These different priorities and leadership aspirations create a balancing act within BRICS, making consensus harder to achieve. On the economic front, BRICS has ambitious economic goals, particularly when it comes to de-dollarization and reducing reliance on Western financial systems. However, these goals are not without their challenges. For instance, Brazil and Russia have supported efforts to create alternatives to the US dollar in trade, but India remains cautious, concerned about the impact on its own economy and its relationships with the Western partners. In addition, India also is interested in internationalizing its own rupee as a medium of exchange in international trade and commerce. Further complicating the situation is the ongoing global economic order, where the US dollar, the SWIFT payment system, and the Western financial institutions still dominate. BRICS has made strides with the new development bank and the BRICS contingent reserve arrangement. But these institutions are still very young. They are not yet in a position to rival the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund. The road to achieving a truly new financial global order is definitely not going to be soon. A recent challenge is the question of digital currencies. While Russia and China have pushed for the development of a BRICS digital currency to bypass Western sanctions and banking systems, India and Brazil remain hesitant. There are concerns about the security of such a currency and the impact on monetary policy. Despite these internal challenges, BRICS has demonstrated remarkable resilience. It continues to grow, expanding its membership and influence. At the recently concluded Kazan summit, 30 new partner countries joined the group. This expansion is a powerful signal that BRICS is not just surviving, but thriving. Even more telling is the diplomatic progress made at the Kazan summit, where the Chinese and Indian leaders held their own bilateral meeting and agreed to ease tensions along the shared border. This was a key moment that showed BRICS' ability to manage conflicts internally and foster dialogue between its most contentious members. These steps underscore the bloc's determination to remain united, even when faced with its most pressing challenges. The rise of BRICS is deeply tied to the broader alignment of the Global South. Developing countries see BRICS as a platform to amplify the voices on global issues. Nations in Africa, Latin America, and Asia are drawn to BRICS not just for economic opportunities, but also for its commitment to challenging the existing Western-dominated global system. Countries like Egypt, Indonesia have publicly endorsed BRICS goals, signaling a growing shift in global alliances. This surge of interest reflects a broader trend among nations seeking alternatives to the US-led global financial and political order. The Global South's alignment with BRICS underscores the bloc's growing importance in shaping a multipolar world. As BRICS expands and attracts global attention, one of its biggest challenges is achieving strategic coherence. With so many new members and competing interests, the group risks becoming a forum for debate rather than action. To counter this, the member states are exploring ways to formalize cooperation. Proposals include creating sector-specific working groups, the strengthening of the new development bank. There is also a third development, it's known as mBridge. mBridge is a payment settlement platform that was set up in 2021 by the central banks of Thailand, Hong Kong, China, and the UAE. Now, as you all know, international settlements are conducted by using US dollars and through the system known as the SWIFT system. Now, these four countries set up mBridge as an experimental platform by which they can settle payments among themselves without using dollars and without using the SWIFT system. And since 2021, they have been testing the system with the help of the Bank of International Settlement. In June, a few months ago, June 2024, the Bank of International Settlement finally announced that this mBridge project has been proven to be viable.
Big news today. The BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, commonly known as the Central Bank for Central Banks, has been working closely with the BRICS bloc coalition, specifically China, to launch a new central bank digital currency CBDC platform. This platform is dubbed Project mBridge. And while it's been in the works for a while, this week there was a new release that caught my attention. Not only because the platform's viable, but because they accepted a fifth full-time member. That member is no one other than Saudi Arabia. Now, the reason why this is so important and so concerning to the US dollar is because Saudi Arabia is, of course, part of OPEC, the oil-producing countries. And Saudi Arabia, in particular, is key to the United States' dominance as having the global reserve currency. What I mean by that is in 1972, when the United States dollar was delinked from gold, there was an agreement made in the following years that all oil would be priced in USD. Because of this agreement, there is always demand for US dollars because all oil is priced in US dollars. Now, some countries have moved away from this, such as Russia or Iran pricing in different currencies, but ultimately the effect of that has still been minimal. But should a country like Saudi Arabia start pricing their oil in a different currency, say the Chinese yuan, well, now we have a huge problem on our hands because the United States dollar will not be in as high of demand. Now, we don't know for sure if that's going to happen. There's been a lot of speculation for a while, though, because Saudi Arabia has not been quiet on this topic. They have been saying now for months that they are open to and considering other currencies. In the past, this wasn't even a possibility because there really weren't any other currencies that they could have considered. But now, with the BRICS bloc growing stronger, there are other options and their strength in numbers. So specifically with this project mBridge, one of the reasons why this feels like they're laying the groundwork here is that mBridge does not support US dollars. So now we're going to have Saudi Arabia be part of this project that specifically is intended to facilitate cross-border payments, but it won't be in US dollars.
Now, because the entire project was still overseen by the Bank of International Settlements, what it meant was SWIFT-based system also has a certain way of keeping an eye on how the mBridge project is proceeding. During the BRICS summit in 2024 that took place in Kazan recently, there was some discussion perhaps of making this mBridge project as the BRICS payment system. That discussion began to take shape, as I understand it, because this idea of creating a new currency for BRICS appeared to be almost an impossible task. So there was this idea that perhaps mBridge could be that thing that BRICS could now take over. Whatever it is, hardly a week after the summit in Kazan ended, the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland suddenly announced that it was pulling out, it was no longer going to host the mBridge project. I don't know what was the intention of doing so, but when it pulled out, China immediately took up the challenge and announced that it would take over the administration of the mBridge project. What has happened now is that the global payment system has been split into two. One is the still very dominant US SWIFT-based system, and now you have a smaller system fledgling, still growing, the mBridge system, which is Chinese administered. So from the strategic perspective, it just appears to be a colossal mistake. From a situation where the US was entirely in control of the global payment system through its SWIFT, perhaps through its own actions, has now created or facilitated the emergence of a dual system, and one which is going to be run by its adversary, which is China. As I look at it, now you have, on the one hand, the United States, which has already warned all the countries not to pursue de-dollarization and also not to pursue this new order that they are thinking about. Whereas on the other hand, there's a very strong push from so many countries to become a member of BRICS, ostensibly because they are all interested in pursuing this new global economic and political order. From the Middle East to Africa, Latin America to Asia, countries are lining up to join BRICS. But what makes BRICS so magnetic? Is it its economic promise, or political independence, or something more? The answer is the BRICS alliance is a symbol of a multipolar world where power is distributed more evenly across regions. While the appeal of BRICS is undeniable, expanding its membership is no straightforward task. Internally, the group is grappling with complex questions. Who should be admitted? Should the focus remain on strategic regions like the Middle East or Africa? Or should BRICS also consider economic powerhouses like Indonesia? How fast should the group grow? Expansion can boost BRICS' global clout, but it could also dilute its cohesion and decision making efficiency. So, some members like China apparently favor rapid expansion to amplify BRICS' global influence, while others like India apparently are more cautious, wary of admitting countries. Despite these debates, one thing is clear: BRICS must expand if it is to remain relevant. Let's revisit South Africa's inclusion in BRICS. When South Africa joined in 2010, it was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a calculated move. By bringing in South Africa, BRICS secured a foothold in Africa, a continent rich in resources like rare earth metals and other materials, which are crucial for the future economic and technological developments. South Africa's geographic position also allowed BRICS to influence critical maritime routes like the Cape of Good Hope. This decision paved the way for BRICS to think strategically about its global influence. Expansion was therefore not just about adding members, but really about putting in the building blocks of controlling or challenging the existing political and economic order. Fast forward to January 2024, when BRICS extended invitations to Egypt, Iran, UAE, Ethiopia, and Saudi Arabia. If you look at the map, you will see that each of these countries brings something unique to the table. What is it? There is the Suez Canal, there's the Red Sea, there is the Persian Gulf. What is common among all of this is that they are producers of oil, they are controlling the maritime routes that brings much of the world's commercial merchandise and oil. Egypt, a gateway to North Africa and the Suez Canal, is one of the world's most critical trade routes. Iran is a powerhouse in energy exports and occupies a strategic location on the Persian Gulf. UAE is a financial hub and a key player in global logistics and trade. Ethiopia represents Africa's growing economic potential, but importantly, offering a strategic influence over the Horn of Africa. Saudi Arabia, one need not say more, is the world's largest oil producer. It sits astride the Red Sea and the Persian Gulf. Southeast Asia's potential membership could revolutionize BRICS' influence over global oil markets. But as we discussed earlier, Saudi Arabia has deferred its admission into the group. So the inclusion of these countries actually was clearly a calculated move to solidify BRICS' grip on critical maritime corridors and energy markets. This is no longer just a bloc of emerging economies. It is a coalition shaping the future of global trade routes, energy flows, and therefore representing a challenge to the existing economic order. The story doesn't end there. Some ASEAN members are also eyeing BRICS as a platform to amplify their own global influence. Malaysia, Thailand, and Vietnam are certainly interested in the economic and trade benefits of aligning with BRICS, particularly in the face of growing economic uncertainty. Indonesia, under its new leadership, has expressed interest to join. For Indonesia, membership in BRICS would also allow it to play a much bigger role in global economy. So for these ASEAN countries, BRICS provides an opportunity to further amplify their own economic interests. So why does it seem like the whole world wants to join BRICS? For many countries, BRICS is not just a group. It's a hope that symbolizes the possibility of a fairer, more balanced world order. So, BRICS really is no longer a bloc of 5 countries. It is a force that's shaping the global landscape. As more nations clamor to join, the group faces both opportunities and challenges. But one thing is clear: BRICS is growing and it is here to stay. Whether securing key trade routes, influencing energy markets, or offering an alternative to the Western dominated order, BRICS is becoming the center of gravity for a new world order. Earlier, we discussed why several ASEAN members would be interested to join BRICS, but what was surprising was 4 of them were admitted as partner countries at the Kazan summit. So let us find out why 4 members of ASEAN were admitted. What is BRICS' agenda? How is all this going to shape global geopolitics? I shall touch on 4 points. On 22nd of October this year, the BRICS members assembled in Kazan, Russia to attend the 16th BRICS summit. Now, this summit was very highly anticipated. Throughout this whole year, BRICS had been in the news. The world was all anxiously looking towards this summit to see what might come out of it. And about 30 odd countries had expressed desire to join this grouping. But the Russian leadership had announced earlier this year that BRICS had decided to put expansion on a moratorium. BRICS wanted time to consolidate, get its structure and working methods in order before bringing in new members. But it was also announced that a certain number of countries could be admitted as partner countries. And true enough, BRICS decided to admit 13 members. Before we proceed, let us do a quick recap about BRICS. Earlier this year, a few other countries were offered membership. They are Iran, Egypt, Ethiopia, and United Arab Emirates. Saudi Arabia was also offered to join this group, but Saudi Arabia declined and has not joined. Why was this particular summit an important one? Well, there are a combination of strategic, political, and economic reasons. For President Putin, for example, the Kazan BRICS summit would be a demonstration to the world that Russia is not isolated as a result of the Western sanctions. But for many other countries, there were pure economic reasons. And for some countries, it is about having a greater voice in international affairs. So it is not all about anti-Western ideology as it has sometimes been made out to be. So why did BRICS admit these 4 ASEAN members? Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. It is because each of them bring a unique contribution and strategic alignment with the agenda of BRICS. Now let us examine the attributes of each of these members one by one. Let us start with Malaysia. Malaysia is a relatively small Asian country, but an important trading country insofar as Southeast Asia is concerned. It is a trading nation. It lies astride, or it sits astride these Straits of Malacca, controlling an important pathway, maritime pathway for international commerce. Don't forget that the island of Penang is a very important production center for these new chips, as more and more companies are trying to diversify their production away from China and Taiwan. Plus, Malaysia is also active diplomatically. It is active, it does not shy away from speaking on issues of global interests. So, Malaysia packs quite a bit of punch. Indonesia is the largest Muslim country in the world. It is also a country that sits astride the Straits of Malacca, so it is also important in that respect. Indonesia is the largest economy in Southeast Asia. And don't forget, it is also an important player in terms of speaking out on international affairs. Thailand is an important economy in Southeast Asia as well. It has got a strong agricultural and tourism base. What about Vietnam? Well, Vietnam is strategically located in the South China Sea, just like Malaysia is. Plus, it is a rapidly growing economy. It is an important voice when we think about Southeast Asia. So, collectively, all these four countries offer a fair representation of all of ASEAN is about. ASEAN's economy is about $3.6 trillion worth, making it about the fifth largest economy. Now, the economies of these four countries alone make up for a huge portion of that 3.6 trillion. In terms of population, these four countries make up close to 490 million or so people out of the 600 odd million who make up the whole of Southeast Asia. That's about 80% of the population. So this is why I say these four countries provide a fair approximation of what Southeast Asia, ASEAN region is all about. So what happens as we move forward? Well, the admission as full members would take some time. The countries would have to be scrutinized by BRICS. They will have to be admitted on a consensus basis. This may take some time. Although I said that it would take some time for new members to be admitted, but Indonesia beat everyone and was admitted as a priority member into BRICS. So let us find out why. The first reason is economics. Indonesia is the largest economy in Southeast Asia. Its economy is about $1.4 trillion as of 2023. So for BRICS, it is vital to have Indonesia as a member, an important member at that. Now, I mentioned to you that the global GDP of BRICS is roughly about 31%, but with the inclusion of Indonesia, it is going to jump over 41% of the global GDP, and therefore now, with Indonesia's inclusion, BRICS becomes an entity that just cannot be ignored. It is too big to be ignored. Number two, Indonesia is a supplier of critical minerals and materials. In my videos on BRICS, I have explained that one of the fundamental strategy employed by BRICS in search of its membership is that the members must be suppliers of critical materials and minerals. The admission of South Africa, for example, was intended specifically for that. The other important mineral component which is being produced by the members of BRICS is, of course, oil, and that's the reason why countries like the several members in the Middle East, including Iran, have been admitted. So Indonesia is on its own, by its own right, a producer of such kind of minerals. So this plays right into the BRICS strategic calculation. Number three, it is strategic location. And again, in a previous video, I have explained that the second important strategic calculation that BRICS takes into account is the location of its members. It is important for BRICS to be in control of the major trade routes. So it is no coincidence that Indonesia should be chosen as a member because it sits astride the Straits of Malacca. This waterway is the other important maritime trade routes that are vital to global economy, and BRICS is determined that its members must come from these regions, and Indonesia fits that bill. Number four is leadership. Indonesia is the de facto leader of ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. It simply is because Indonesia is the biggest power in this region, and therefore Indonesia's voice, as globally speaking, is very important. And that is, I think, one of the most valuable assets, intangible assets that Indonesia brings to BRICS. For that reason, Indonesia is indispensable, if you ask me, for BRICS. And number five, linked somewhat to its global leadership, is Indonesia's position on non-alignment. Now, Indonesia, as you know, is one of the founding fathers, or in fact parents, of the non-aligned movement with its Bandung conference in the 1950s. So Indonesia has always had a preferred position when it comes to the global south, as a voice for the global south in many ways, and non-alignment is one of them. And this is again a very important strategic asset for BRICS Indonesia very early on, as in 2025. And number 6 is population. Indonesia has 280 million. Imagine having a member like Indonesia in BRICS. It simply elevates BRICS to another level of importance. With the admission of BRICS, now the population of BRICS would be well over half of the world's population. So again, as I said, from the economic standpoint, BRICS just simply cannot be ignored. But when you throw in the component of population, its strategic location, and its voice, politically speaking, BRICS is simply no pushover. Now it is actually a force to be contended with. So Indonesia's admission has basically now positioned BRICS in a different league altogether, if you were to ask me. An important league as an important player. That is why Indonesia has to be brought in early. I have mentioned to you that BRICS is positioning itself by putting in the strategic building blocks, starting with the strategic materials, the supply routes, and then it goes on to the banking system, which is another area which I've spoken about in the previous videos. You can see now a big picture emerging. A solid world economic order is being built on these pillars which I have just spoken about. Of course, there is a long way to go, but BRICS is very careful and cautious about how it is going about doing it. It is in no hurry, in my opinion. I think it is also allowing the existing order to adjust itself so that it is not going to be confrontational. Would you agree with me that BRICS is emerging to be an important political and economic player in the world? It is important to you and to me because it will have material impact upon the way we work, upon the way businesses are done, how economy, globally speaking, is going to shape up. So it is something that we cannot ignore. We have to keep in mind and understand very clearly where BRICS is coming from. And as I have said in my video, this is not the end form of BRICS. I'm sure more is coming on. A few more members would be admitted. Maybe more structural, decisions might be taken, perhaps in terms of secretariat and things of that sort. But I think for the time being, these are not necessary for BRICS. But you should not be surprised if these were to happen in the future. But when you look at other important alliances like the G7, for example, they don't have a permanent secretariat, but they are very powerful indeed. So BRICS could easily function along the same way as well without having to have a formal structure. But whatever it is, BRICS is not a passing fad, as I said. It is an important, significant development of our times. In fact, I would even go so far as to say that it is the unexpected rise of a new global superpower. So please hit the like button, share and subscribe, and I would love to hear your comments as well. Thank you very much.